last thing that we're going to talk about today is this situation around Hunter Biden. Did we just get blocked or suppressed? So, things with this story that you've probably heard. It's real, it's completely fake, it's misinformation meant to meddle with the election. Also, social media sites are trying to censor it and scrub it off of their platforms, but here, let's try and start at the beginning. Right, and that brings us back to this last Wednesday when the New York Post publishes an exclusive article titled, "Smoking Gun Email Reveals How Hunter Biden Introduced Ukrainian Businessman to VP Dad." And that article makes a few key allegations. The first claim being that in April of 2015, Hunter Biden introduced his father, who was then vice president, to a top executive at Burisma Holdings, right, one of the largest independent natural gas producers in Ukraine. And that would be notable because of the information that we already knew before this article. At that point, Hunter Biden was on the board of Burisma. Also, because Joe Biden, under the direction of then President Obama, was the point person in charge of U.S. policy toward Ukraine. And by December of that same year, Joe Biden had begun pressuring Ukrainian officials to fire Ukraine's prosecutor general, who had inherited an investigation into Burisma after taking up the position. And while many Ukrainian and U.S. officials said he had basically let that investigation fizzle out, he did say that he had made specific plans to investigate Burisma that included interrogations and other crime investigation procedures into all members of the executive board, including Hunter Biden. With that prosecutor being eventually fired in March of 2016, in part after Joe Biden threatened to withhold $1 billion in loan guarantees to Ukraine. Though notably, his removal was also something that many other world leaders had been pushing for. And in fact, according to reports, Biden was just carrying out an established foreign policy that had been developed by the State Department and coordinated with the European Union and other international institutions. And this over concerns that the prosecutor was not aggressively pursuing investigations and was protecting corrupt oligarchs. You even have the former foreign minister of Ukraine saying, "I heard it in every meeting with the international financial institutions, especially the IMF and World Bank. It was not just Biden." Clearly. As far as how the Post says that they obtained the information that Biden had met with a top executive, they cited an email where an advisor to the board of Burisma thanked Hunter for giving him an opportunity to meet Joe Biden. The Post then went on to call this a blockbuster correspondence, since Joe Biden has consistently denied any claims of a conflict of interest and even publicly responded to questions about the accusations with,
"I've never spoken to my son about going to sleep."
With the Post also saying that the email was contained in what they called a massive trove of data recovered from a laptop, which they said included, among other things, a video that appears to show Hunter smoking crack while engaged in a sex act with an unidentified woman, numerous other sexually explicit images, as well as other photos from Hunter Biden's childhood and vacations. According to the Post, that laptop also contains several other notable emails, including one from 2014 that appears to show that same advisor from that first email attempting to persuade Hunter into using his political leverage to help Burisma, as well as another from 2014 that the Post says is evidence of Hunter leveraging connections with his father to boost his pay from Burisma. Now, regarding that laptop, the Post claims that it was dropped off at a repair shop in Delaware in April of last year, and notably here they claim that the person who dropped off the laptop never came back for it, even though the owner told the Post that he had repeatedly tried to contact them. Also saying that while the owner said that he could not positively identify if the customer had been Hunter Biden, he said the laptop did bear a sticker from the Beau Biden Foundation. Right, so the Post seemed to suggest that Hunter Biden was the person who dropped off the laptop, with the Post saying that the shop owner then alerted the feds of the existence of the data on the laptop, and in December, the FBI seized the computer. However, the shop owner also says that he made a copy of the hard drive that he then gave to Robert Costello, who is Rudy Giuliani's lawyer. Former Trump advisor Steve Bannon then reportedly tips off the Post about the existence of this hard drive in late September, and on October 11th, Giuliani reportedly provides the Post with a copy. And the timing of all this is incredibly notable, right? Because this information and these claims went public only a few weeks after a Republican-led Senate investigation cleared Joe Biden of any wrongdoing whatsoever relating to how he handled U.S. policy in Ukraine while his son was working for Burisma. Right, the worst that could be said from this investigation was that Hunter cashed in on his father's name to get the lucrative Burisma job, with Republicans claiming that that led to awkward situations with career diplomats in the region who needed to be aware of his job. Although all 10 witnesses that were part of this investigation disputed that characterization. And while it was found to be unclear if Hunter's role at Burisma affected U.S. policy in any other ways, again, the Republican-led investigation concluded that Joe Biden didn't do anything improper. But, you know, with the release of this article, almost immediately doubts began to surface. One of the most focused on reactions, though, was we saw both Facebook and Twitter taking steps to limit the spread of this article, with the Washington Post even noting how unusual of a move this was, because rarely have those platforms sanctioned a traditional media outlet. For example, Facebook originally reduced the story spread while it was checked by independent fact checkers, and after surging to number 3 on its US trending page, Twitter marked the link to the article as potentially unsafe before blocking it altogether. They then went several steps further, temporarily locking the accounts of the Post as well as White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany and the Trump campaign, saying that those accounts violated its rules on publishing hacked material. And it very much appears that a lot of this response is tied to how social media sites, especially Facebook and Twitter, fumbled when handling the 2016 Hillary Clinton email dump, right? Both of them likely worried about disinformation swaying the election and being complicit in the spread. But with all of this, we saw people like President Trump saying, so terrible that Facebook and Twitter took down the story of smoking gun emails related to sleepy Joe Biden and his son Hunter in the New York Post. It is only the beginning for them. There is nothing worse than a corrupt politician. With Trump also adding that the law which allows social media companies to remove content from their platforms should be repealed, right? Trump here essentially chalking this up to politically motivated censorship in an attempt to protect Joe Biden. With Trump campaign spokesperson Tim Murtaugh also saying this was a breathtaking level of political meddling and nothing short of an attempt to rig the election. Now, with all of that said, we should also talk about the actual doubts surrounding this article. For one, so far, as of recording this video, the New York Post is the only media outlet that has obtained the data from this alleged hard drive. This because requests to access the hard drive have not been granted to any other outlets. And as the Washington Post notes, the New York Post published PDF printouts of several emails allegedly taken from the laptop, but the quote smoking gun email, it shows only a photo made the day before the story was posted, with a disinformation expert telling them there is no header information, no metadata. All right, so that's a red flag to many, and we're in this situation where no other source has had the chance to independently verify any of this information. And on top of that, you also have people who are skeptical pointing back to that alleged email the New York Post said was evidence of Hunter leveraging connections with his father to boost his pay. And there, they note that Hunter appears to contradict the idea that he could influence his father, saying, what he will say and do is out of our hands. In other words, it could be a really good thing, or it could end up creating too great an expectation. We need to temper expectations regarding that visit. Also, in a separate article, the New York Post alleges that a public relations company that worked for Burisma was allowed to take part in a conference call about an upcoming 2015 Ukraine visit by Joe Biden. However, as critics have said, it's not like the details of that call are a secret. A full transcript of that call has been on the White House website since 2015. You also have a campaign spokesperson for Joe Biden saying that a review of Biden's schedules from 2015 show no record of any such meeting between him and the Burisma advisor. With Michael Carpenter, Biden's former policy advisor in 2015, saying, I was with the vice president in all of his meetings on Ukraine. He never met with this guy. In fact, I had never heard of this guy until the New York Post story broke. Similarly, the Post cites another email where that advisor tells Hunter Biden that he was going to share information with the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv, as well with the office of then Special Envoy and Coordinator for International Energy Affairs, Amaz Hochstein. However, since the publication of this alleged email, we've seen Hochstein saying, I know for a fact he never contacted me or my office. I provided every record to the Senate investigation and no mention of this guy was ever made. No emails, no correspondence. I know almost every player in the energy sector in Ukraine. I never met this guy. Now, even with all of that, let's just pretend for a moment that Joe Biden did meet this Burisma advisor. The thing there is that the context of how they met would be critically important. And as multiple critics of the Post have noted, it is possible that Joe Biden shook hands with or briefly met that advisor while in an event. In fact, in another situation altogether, Hunter Biden once helped arrange for a potential business partner to shake hands with his father in the lobby of a Beijing hotel. Right? And so a big part of what they're saying here is that if Joe Biden did meet with this advisor, which as of right now they're saying he didn't, it would also be important to consider any context of the situation, how long they talked, if what they talked about was anything substantial. And all of that criticism, the doubts, they were then compounded yesterday when we saw multiple outlets reporting that this smoking gun article, it was written mostly by a staff reporter who refused to put his name on it, according to two Post employees, with that reporter allegedly being Bruce Golding, who has been at the Post since 2007, with him reportedly refusing to allow his byline specifically because he had concerns over the article's credibility. But reportedly, it wasn't just him. At least one other person aside from him also refused to put their name on the story. Now, just looking at the article, the byline does show two authors, Emma Jo Morris and Gabrielle Fonrouge. Notably, Morris is a deputy politics editor at the Post, with this being her first byline at the paper since she joined this year after leaving as an associate producer on Sean Hannity's show on Fox News. And the other author, Fonrouge, reportedly had little to do with the article and only found out her name was on it after it was published. Also, according to the New York Times, many Post staff members questioned whether the Post had done enough to verify the authenticity of the hard drive's contents, with reporters for the Post telling the Intelligencer, I think it was very flimsy. It's not something that meets my journalistic standards. The second reporter adding that the piece should not have been published. You also had other staff members voicing concerns about the article's timing and the reliability of its sources, right? Those sources, of course, being Bannon, who's facing federal fraud charges, with Giuliani, who said he chose the Post because either nobody else would take it, or if they took it, they would spend all the time they could to try to contradict it before they put it out. Which, I will say, just kind of sit on that quote for a moment to really drink it in. They want to fact-check claims? Rubbish. In fact, just this morning, we even saw reports that Giuliani first approached Fox News with this story. However, according to two sources who spoke to Mediaite, Fox Fox's news division chose not to run the story until the sourcing and authenticity of those emails could be properly vetted. That said, for their part, the New York Post has tried to defend their piece, yesterday releasing an article titled "Unverified is a False Excuse for Ignoring the Post-Hunter Biden Scoop." Their defense including the fact that multiple outlets have interviewed the computer repair shop owner that got access to Hunter's alleged hard drive in the first place. Although, of course, no other outlets have been able to access any information from the hard drive directly, which is a pretty key step in independently verifying the information. However, the Post says that this is not an excuse because they posted other images not related to Ukraine, right? Things from Hunter Biden's personal life that they claim is enough proof that they have access to the hard drive, with the Post then calling out other outlets saying that they hide behind anonymous sources. It's particularly rich that the New York Times has fixated on the unverified excuse since it spent much of the Trump era offering supposed dirt from anonymous sources, which, by definition, makes the info unverifiable. Now, with all that said, of course, it brings us to the big question of, well, why now? Right? I mean, well, the obvious reason is that the election is now just 2 weeks away, so you have critics pointing out that this could be intended to be an October surprise, whether real or not, right? Because regardless if this is just misinformation, it could impact the election, even if after the election it was found to not be valid, right? And with this, there are, of course, a lot of questions regarding the timeline, right? If Giuliani got this hard drive before the Senate investigation into Biden had finished, if everything on this hard drive was real, it proves something on Joe Biden, why would he just sit on it and then ultimately give it to the Post? And like, that doesn't actually sound like something that makes sense to do. Also, the fact that this came from him at all is a red flag, right? As has been noted, Giuliani has regularly interacted with a Ukrainian lawmaker who was recently sanctioned by the US Treasury Department as an active Russian agent for over a decade. Notably, the Treasury also pointing out that this lawmaker has engaged in an influence operation to affect the 2020 election. And that's important because the FBI is now reportedly investigating whether this hard drive is part of a disinformation campaign being pushed by Russia. But to be clear, that news comes from an anonymous congressional source, and currently the FBI has neither confirmed nor denied the existence of the investigation and has actually refused to discuss the topic. But still, those allegations were echoed by House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff, with him claiming over the weekend that this was all part of a Russian smear campaign. But on the opposite side of that, while speaking on Fox News this morning, Trump's Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, disputed that claim.
Let me be clear. The intelligence community doesn't believe that because there's no intelligence that supports that. And we have shared no intelligence with Chairman Schiff or any other member of Congress that Hunter Biden's laptop is part of some Russian disinformation campaign.
However, according to a senior intelligence official who spoke to the Daily Beast, the feds are still working to determine if this laptop is part of a Russian disinformation campaign. And beyond that, other intelligence officials have also said that the way that the Hunter Biden materials have been packaged, it is fully in line with something the Russians would do to create chaos in the election. With a spokesperson for Schiff also noting that the intelligence community has publicly said that Russia is trying to interfere in the election to help Trump. And adding, the new wave of attacks we are seeing are consistent with the false and unsubstantiated narratives that the president, his personal lawyer, and a sanctioned Russian agent have been pushing for well over a year. And to that point, we have also seen Ratcliffe's own record being attacked, being called by some as a Trump loyalist who has come under withering criticism from intelligence veterans for manipulating intelligence to aid his boss's re-election. Others also noting that Trump had withdrawn Ratcliffe's nomination for DNI back in 2019, but then Trump re-nominated him in 2020 after he served on Trump's impeachment team, with many pointing to the fact that the reason his nomination was withdrawn in the first place was because Senate Democrats and members of the intelligence community said that he was too partisan for a non-partisan position, with several Democrats specifically accusing him of actively spreading information that the intelligence community had deemed to be false regarding Russia and the 2016 election, as well as promoting debunked conspiracies about the following investigation and calling for the prosecution of Trump's political enemies. But ultimately, that is where we are with this story as of right now. It is something that I'll be keeping an eye on, though, reporting on a slight delay. As important as it is to talk about things, it is also important to not accidentally use your platform to promote things that are not verified. Everyone in this industry has or will at some point be burned by jumping on something too soon. But yeah, with all that said, I then want to pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts on this? And that is where I'm going to end today's show.